Crab Hunt, and it will be read by Mr. Adrian Atkinson, who is a senior presenter at the JIS. Welcome, Mr. Atkinson. Please take us through this story.
Hi, good morning, boys and girls, wherever you're choosing to watch us this morning, and welcome to the JIS Read Across Jamaica Day. And so I'm going to be reading for you Crab Hunt. They were on their way walking through the night on the St. Thomas Road. Now, George, the only adult in the party, was in the lead. Close behind him followed Edward and Altamont, both aged 13. Edward carried an empty crocus bag folded small on his head. George and Altamont both had torches, but they had not lit them. There was silence for a while as they walked on. Then Altamont spoke. "George," he asked, "why are we going out when it is so wet? Couldn't we have come on a dry night? Last night, for instance?" "No," George replied. "Today's rain has made it ideal for catching crabs. When rain falls, the crab holes fill up with water and creatures have to leave them and get onto dry land. On a night like this, the crabs are homeless, and when we make a grab at them, they can't rush into a hole and escape from us. We shall catch them easily and fill up our bag." "Me?" asked Altie. "I can't catch crabs. I have never held a crab in my life." "All right," George said, holding up his hand. "You will learn. Tonight you will learn how to catch crabs, my friend. But I have been told that if they ever grip you with one of their claws, they won't let go unless you squeeze their eyes. And I don't want—" "Listen, Altie," George said. "What you have heard is not true. A crab only pinches in an emergency to force you to let it go. As soon as you let go, he will take to his heels." "Do they have heels?" Eddie asked. They passed through Golden Grove and headed for the morass at Holland Bay. "I love crabs," Eddie said. "When we buy them in Kingston, we boil them, and aren't they nice? I like the claw best of all. Which part do you like, Altie?" Altie did not answer. "What's wrong, Altie? Can't you say something? Don't you love crab meat?" "Well, yes, but I'm thinking." "Or what?" In the darkness, neither George nor Eddie could see him make a grimace. "To be exact, I'm remembering." "You mean you're remembering a crab feast?" "Something more serious. I was remembering some Jamaican geography. It makes me think of a feast, yes, but not a crab feast, an alligator feast." "What? Who wants any alligator to eat?" "Not me. When I say alligator feast," Altie explained, "I don't mean we would eat alligators. Just the reverse. It means being eaten by an alligator that worries me. St. Thomas is noted for crocodiles. I have read in the newspapers that pigs and goats have disappeared around these parts and crocodiles are suspected of having eaten them. Maybe one of us will disappear tonight. I only hope I won't be the one. Yes, there are crocodiles in St. Thomas, but they are uncommon. The possibility of our being eaten tonight by a crocodile is as remote as the cultivation of wheat in Jamaica," George said. The boys gained confidence after George had spoken, and the three went on their way. They soon lit their torches and began to pick up crabs along the road. At their approach, the crabs scurried for their holes in the banks of the road. They were not always quick enough, and Altie and George grabbed some and put them carefully into the crocus bags. "Boy, this is fun," Altie said, after he had picked up about half a dozen small ones. "I'm not doing badly at all. Am I, George?" "You're doing fine so far," the man said, too busy to pay much attention to Altie. He was backing up a big crab, which was holding out his pincher-like claws to defend itself. Then Altie saw another large crab scurrying along in the water table, and not wanting it to get away, he seized it. The crab swung its giant claw off the ground and pinched one of his fingers. Altie let go. "Ouch!" he cried. What's the matter? Asked George, coming up with the crab he had just captured. I have been bitten, said Alty, holding his finger and nursing it. I'm not going to catch any more. Don't be silly, said George. Look, if you hold any crab from behind like this, it cannot bite you. It cannot swing its claws back far enough to reach your hand. See what I mean? He held up the huge crab he was carrying. After the lesson, the crab was dropped into the bag with the others, and the three hunters continued on their way until they reached the open land by the side of the morass. There, in the flickering light of their torches, they could see the lesions of crab. I want to catch some too, Eddie complained, but carrying the bag around isn't much fun. May I catch some too? All right, George said. Give me the bag. Catch your crabs, but be careful. You saw the lesson I gave to Alty, didn't you? Eddie said that he had and gladly passed the bag to George. The crabs were moving along about in the bag, trying to climb up the side of it. But they were getting in each other's way. From the sack came a continuous grinding noise of shell against shell. Eddie moved carefully and slowly at first, but in a little while he began to catch the creatures more quickly. As they worked their way farther and farther into the morass, he and Alty forgot about crocodiles and thought only of crab hunting. They splashed in water and got their shoes wet. They chased crabs up trees and across ditches. Crabs were now the only things of which they were conscious. Then Eddie came face to face with two large eyes, larger than crab's eyes. Eddie halted, his body tense. He looked at the eyes, and the eyes looked back at him. With the light of the torch shining on them, they were red. They seemed to be set in a flat, pointed piece of log. Eddie could see cracks in it, just as there would be on their old piece of wood. Then the log with the eyes on it moved. Suddenly, Eddie knew what the thing was. He shrieked and jumped up in the air. What is it? George said in a strained voice. He was with Alty about half a chain away. A crocodile, Eddie shouted. What? A crocodile? Repeated Eddie. Look out! Then George and Alty heard it coming. It was coming towards them, splashing in the water and slipping across the mud. Alty remembered his own warning about crocodiles in St. Thomas. He let go of the crab he had just caught and ran full speed for the road. The crocodile stopped for a moment, then came at him. George could see it clearly, for by now the moon had risen. The long and somewhat clumsy reptile could not catch him. Each time it charged, George dodged around the tree and escaped. On one occasion, the crocodile came straight for him and butted the tree in a head-on collision. This made it even more angry, and George knew it was time to move away from the spot. He ran to a larger tree and clambered into it, hoped it would bear his weight. Looking down, he saw that the reptile had followed him and was waiting underneath. Eddie, George called. Where are you, Eddie? Here, Eddie said in a whisper. Climb down, Eddie, George commanded. Do it slowly and quietly. Watch the crocodile. It is not looking at you, Eddie, but at me. So it won't come after you. The road is that way. He pointed behind him. You can do it, boy. Alty was already gone. I'll soon follow. George had spoken so earnestly that Eddie dared not disobey. Slowly, carefully, and as quietly as he could, he began his descent. He never took his eyes from the crocodile waiting under the tree. It reached the swampy ground, and for the first time, he realized that it was too wet and sticky to run on. For a fleeting moment, he thought of his home and of his mother. Perhaps she would never see him again. Go to the country, she had said when he was leaving. go to the country and come back fat. Now, it seemed that it would be the crocodile and not he who would get fat. Go on, Eddie. That's it, George. Go on, while the going is good. Eddie moved as silently as he could, making a wide semicircle around the crocodile. As he went, he anxiously watched the crocodile, waiting for George to come down or to fall off the tree. To Eddie, moving away, it seemed that the reptile was satisfied to wait forever. Soon Eddie disappeared behind a clump of mangroves. George hoped that the crocodile did not have a mate anywhere nearby, for crocodiles sometimes traveled around in pairs. If there was a second one, it might attack Eddie. He stopped and considered the situation. He realized that if he jumped down, he could never escape. Then he had an idea. Reaching up, he broke off a branch and stripped it off its leaves. Then, sitting astride the lowest branch of the tree, George swung his foot towards the reptile. The beast snapped at it, and George quickly moved out of reach. Next, he lowered the branch and swung it in the same way. The crocodile snapped at it too. Good, thought George. It didn't see the difference. Obviously, any moving object will distract it. With a heave, George flung the branch as far as he could, and at the same time he jumped into the opposite direction. The crocodile was deceived. It rushed after the branch. By the time it realized its mistake, George had made good his escape. George did not look back. He splashed through the morass as fast as he could, reaching the road in less than a minute. When he arrived, he found Altie and Eddie balancing on the rails of a bridge. He found Altie and they had taken up this position because standing on the ground did not seem safe anymore. Let's go, George said, and the boys jumped down on the road without delay. The three of them scampered towards Golden Grove. And that is the end of this story called Crab Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. Now, that was a thrilling story. Have you ever been crab hunting before? My goodness. I was on the edge of my seat for the first story. That one had me even more nervous. Now, earlier we asked some students to tell us how reading has helped them. We're going to go back to hear some more of those comments from our students, and let's hear them right now.
My name is Deshaun Dennis and I am a student of Crystal of Jamaica. Reading has helped me to better understand my schoolwork. When I grow up, I would like to become a football player, and reading will help me to understand the contracts before I sign them.
My name is Roderick Crawford. I attend the Harborview Primary School. Reading helps me on a daily basis to make more informed and smart decisions. Reading helps me to relax. It increases my vocabulary and boosts my confidence as I relate with others from all social standings and various topics. Reading helps me when communicating at school, church, or just socializing with my friends. I know it will impact my future significantly.
All right. Thank you so much for those comments, just telling us how reading has helped you. Remember, just to think about our other story before, if you see a crocodile, call the National Environment and Planning Agency immediately and do not go near it. Now let's check in on our comments on the last story to see how children will.
My name is Dante Barnum. I attend the Gibraltar Primary and Infant School.
Let me see if we have some brave children in the comments. All right, so listening from Fort Campbell's Academy. I see Monique Mulling saying that, listen, I don't know what I would do if I came face to face with a crocodile. Perhaps I would take the same route that George did. Someone is commenting, here we have someone saying, this is Samantha. Samantha says She thought it was very smart of George to use distraction to delay being eaten by the crocodile. All right. And another comment, a very interesting comment. It's so interesting that our mothers are always encouraging us to get fat at this age. Okay. All right. And we have students joining also from Denby Primary. Good morning, Denby Primary. And Seaside Primary. Good morning, all the boys and girls at Seaside Primary. So happy that you could join us. And Dallas Primary, folks watching Dallas Primary and Infant. Okay, so good. We have children who are listening, and I'm sure that you've been enjoying the stories. Now, we have some more great Jamaican stories for you. And you can also tell us what your favorite, what some of your favorite Jamaican stories are.
My name is Dante Barlow. I attend the Gibraltar Primary and Infant School. My favorite Jamaican story is The Gingerbread Man with Jamaican Spice. It is my favorite story because some people were chasing him and a vendor woman caught him and ate him.
My name is Kamari Rogers. The name of my school is Belmont Park Primary School. My favorite Jamaican story is Sweet Sweet Mango Tree. It is my favorite because it teaches us to be polite, and I love mangoes. My
name is Daniel Martin and I attend Gibraltar Primary and Infant School. My favorite book is Lazy and Nancy. It is my favorite book because it creates a funny atmosphere and it's very exciting to read.
Next story, and we so appreciate the feedback from our boys and girls. It is Back to School. It will be read by literacy specialist for Region 1 at the Ministry of Education and Youth, Ms. Francella McBean. Let's read.
The title of the story is Back to School. Good morning, Mrs. Brown, said the strange, well-dressed man at the door. May I speak with you for a moment, please? Speak to me, sir, replied Mrs. Brown. What business do you have with me? I am a very busy woman and I don't have much time to talk. Please, Mrs. Brown, said the man. It's about your son, Errol. I am Mr. Lee, the new principal at Content Valley School. I have not seen your son for over a month now. I am wondering if anything is wrong. Wrong, said Mrs. Brown. Plenty is wrong. I have 7 children, and all of them are supposed to be in school. Some are bright, some are not so bright, but I try with all of them, except Errol. I don't think Errol will ever come to anything. I think I know what is wrong with Errol, he began. I have been talking to some of his teachers, and from what they told me, I think your son is having a hearing problem. That's a joke, laughed Mrs. Brown. Errol hears what he wants to hear. He can turn his ears on and turn them off whenever he wants. Hearing problem, she repeated. She began to laugh again. It's not a joke, Mr. Lee continued. I am very serious. It seems to me that your son is almost deaf. In fact, 3 teachers have told me. Just then, Mr. Lee looked up and saw Errol coming into the room. He was big and his age and looked very strong. Sorry, Mom. Sorry, sir, said Errol in a loud voice. I am going to the standpipe to fill the pan of water. I will come back soon. Well, bring back some washing soap from the shop, said Errol's mother. Tell Miss Mattie that I will pay her tomorrow. Errol turned around to his mother. What did you say, ma'am? He asked. I said, repeated Mrs. Brown, to bring back some washing soap from the shop and tell Miss Mattie I will pay her for the soap tomorrow. Yes, ma'am, said Errol. And after that, he left the house. You see, said Mr. Lee, Errol has to be looking at you to hear what you are saying. Since he cannot hear you very well, he has to watch your mouth to find out what it is that you're saying. Mrs. Brown thought about it for a while. That much is true, she finally agreed. I do notice that he has to be looking at me to hear me. Not only that, Mrs. Brown, but he talks in a very loud voice. This is because he's almost deaf and he doesn't know how loud he's talking. There's one thing I would like to try for Errol, said Mr. Lee. I would want to take Errol to Kingston next week, Tuesday, and let a hearing specialist examine him. He will be able to tell us anything that can be done. Specialist? Repeated Mrs. Brown. Which hearing specialist? I don't have any money to pay for any hearing specialist. Bright and early Tuesday morning, Mr. Lee came by the house to take Errol to the Kingston Public Hospital. Finally, when they reached the hospital, Errol said, Mr. Lee, what if the doctor cannot fix me up? Can I still go back to your school, sir? Mr. Lee put his hand on Errol's head. Son, he said, there will always be a place in my school for you. But I have more in mind for you than that. Inside the hospital, Errol and Mr. Lee stayed in a big waiting room until a doctor came out and called Errol's name. Then, leaving Mr. Lee behind, the doctor and Errol walked off together into the smaller room. Errol, said the doctor slowly, please sit down in this big chair. I am going to have a good look inside your ears. After that, I am going to let you wear a special earphone. You can listen to some talking. Then the doctor picked up the earphone and put them beside Errol. Errol was very happy now. He had seen these kinds of earphones before, but he has never gotten a chance to try them. He did not know that a visit to the doctor could be so much fun. Errol did as he was told, and before long, the tests were finished. Okay, Errol, said the doctor, we are finished now. Come outside, and I will tell you both what can be done. Errol and the doctor walked back to the waiting room. When Mr. Lee saw them, he stood up. Then he walked towards the doctor. You don't have to talk so softly, Mr. Lee, said the doctor. I want Errol to hear anything that I have to say. After all, very soon he will be hearing just as well as you and I. Errol and Mr. Lee began to smile while the doctor explained to them what was wrong. He told them that Errol's eardrum were not working properly and how with the help of hearing aid, Errol will be able to hear everything again. He then explained the way a hearing aid works and how it fits right inside the ear. Finally, he took them to another room and showed them what a hearing aid looks like. Errol was very happy now, but Mr. Lee still looked a little worried. Excuse me, doctor, he said at last. I have a question. I am wondering if these hearing aids cost a lot of money. Well, Mr. Lee, replied the doctor, the hearing aid that Errol needs cost about $4,000. Mr. Lee's mouth dropped suddenly. But we don't have that kind of money, sir, he said. The doctor looked at Errol and Mr. Lee. He really liked them and tried to think of a way to help them. Finally, he said, sometimes the hospital can pay part of the cost for these kinds of things, but we do not have enough to cover you all the money. If you come up with $2,000, we will match it with another $2,000. Altogether, that will be enough for Errol's hearing aid. Both Errol and Mr. Lee thanked the doctor. but they were still worried about where they could get the rest of the money. All the way back to Content Valley, Errol and Mr. Lee talked about where they could get the other $2,000. Suddenly Errol said, I have a good idea. What about a film show at school? We can have it at night so that many people will come. Mr. Lee smiled. Errol said, that is a very good idea. Perhaps we can sell things to eat and drink as well. People love to eat when they are watching film shows. Yes, agreed Errol. That is another good idea. And my mother can help. She is a very, very good cook. The next 2 weeks were busy ones for Errol and Mrs. Brown. Mr. Lee had to go to town again to pick up the film. He decided that a good action movie would draw the biggest crowd. Errol's job was to cut little pieces of paper and make tickets for the show. He also hung up notices all around the town. Errol even had a friend of his put up some of these notices at the shop in Grove. That's another village about 4 miles from where they lived. Mrs. Brown had most of the work to do. The whole week before the show, she made coconut drops and pudding for the people to eat. And on the day of the show, she prepared orange juice and ginger beer. At last, the night of the film show arrived, and everybody was ready. Everything was ready. They were going to show the film in a big classroom. Errol, Mrs. Brown, and Mr. Lee stood outside selling tickets, drinks, and food. Well, said Mr. Lee, everything looks good up to now, but we still need to sell more tickets and more food to make $2,000. But the movies start in 10 minutes, said Mrs. Brown. Something better happen quick. Just at that moment, Errol saw some lights coming up the road. Just a minute, Mr. Lee, he said. I think I see a car. Maybe they are coming to watch the movie. Errol and Mr. Lee waited, and before long the lights were coming right at them. Errol was right. Soon the bus came to a stop, and the driver walked over to Mr. Lee. Is this where they're having the film show? He asked. Yes, said Mr. Lee. This is the right place. Well, I have 60 people here from the village of Grove, and they saw the notice about the film show in the big shop, and now they're here to see the movie. Errol and Mr. Lee and Mrs. Brown could not believe their ears. And I hope you have something for them to eat as well, continued the driver. You can't watch a film show with a hungry belly. Before long, the 60 people and the bus driver were in the school watching the film show. Mrs. Brown, Mr. Lee, and Errol stood at the door and looked inside at the film. Just look at that, whispered Mrs. Brown. Almost all the food is finished. We also ran out of tickets, added Mr. Lee. Some people are having to stand and watch the show. And I will be starting school next week, said Errol in a loud voice. I will be able to hear everything the teacher has to say. And that is the end of the story. Back to school.
Thank you, Ms. McBean. Wasn't it just so heartwarming to see how the community came together to help raise money for Errol's hearing aid? And we saw the power of Mr. Lee's selflessness and collective action of the community in breaking down barriers and ensuring that Errol, regardless of his circumstance, has the opportunity to thrive and reach his full potential, because every child can learn and every child must learn. Good going, Mr. Lee, and well done, Errol and his family. Now, let's check in on some of your comments on the story. I have to shout out some primary schools and high schools as well. So Belmont Park Primary, good morning to all the boys and girls who are tuning in from Belmont Park Primary. Yes, there is Taki High School. That's good. We have a high school. Chatsworth Primary and Infant School Grade 6 students. Good morning. They are listening and enjoying the story. We're very happy that you could join us. And there are students also commenting from, which school is this? Here it is, Jesse Ripple and Fogo Road High in Clarendon. Good morning to the folks there. And I think the sentiment is it was a heartwarming story to know that people rallied around each other, and we should try to take that sentiment throughout Education Week, but even beyond. Look out for each other. All right, so keep those coming in, those comments coming in. We love it. We love to see what you think about the stories. If you're just joining us, welcome to the live reading session here, Jamaica Day. If you're watching us on Instagram, give us a follow now. If you're on Facebook, remember to like our page. If you're watching us on the JIS YouTube channel, remember to subscribe and be notified when we upload new content, and we have great contents. Just take it from me. And along with your favorite stories, we also asked what books you are reading now, and here they are.
My name is Layla Daly and I go to Belmont Primary School. The book I'm reading currently is called Dork Diaries, Tales from a Not-So-Talented Pop Star. What I like about this book so far is that these characters in this story are very relatable, encouraging, courageous, and brave. And they face many problems in their life, but they eventually figure out how to overcome them.
My name is Dariel Freckleton, and I attend the St. Elizabeth Technical High School. The book that I am currently reading is Oliver Twist. What I like about this book is the way that Oliver found his strength to overcome hardship and survive even when he was by himself.
Hi, my name is Hollistar Wilson, Deputy Head Girl of Freetown Primary School. A book I've read recently is a book called Hats Off to Mommy. I enjoy this book because it is celebrating the importance of a mother, and it also reminds me of my mother.
Speaking of mothers, yes, up next, I'm very excited, can you tell? We have a mother and son pair who I am sure you will enjoy, Mrs. Fiona Dwyer Wilson and her son Blake Wilson. Now, Blake is a very special person here at the JIS. Blake is the second place winner of the 2023 JIS Heritage Essay Competition. He and his mother will both read Ordeal at Sea. Are you ready? Are you ready? Okay. Welcome, Mrs. Wilson and Blake.
Thank you. Our story this morning is Ordeal at Sea.
Robbie sat with his sister Gay in the garden of their house looking at the sea. From a distance, it invited, even tempted him. Earlier in the day, the waves had come racing in to smash themselves in white spray on the rocks. Now only little ripples lapped gently at their base. The temptation was too much for Robbie.
Let's go to sea, Gay, he said. To sea? Yes, to sea. Let's go out in Daddy's boat. Robbie, you must be crazy. You can't handle the boat.
Robbie turned and looked at her. Confidence shone in his dark eyes.
Of course I can, he said. Didn't Daddy give me the tiller the other day when we went sailing? You were there. You must have seen. That was different, Gay replied. Daddy was there to make sure that nothing went wrong. It wasn't different. So what's difficult about sailing a motorboat anyway? All I have to do is start the engine and steer properly. What could go wrong? We ought not to go, Gay protested. If Daddy were here. Well, he's not here, said Robbie impatiently. He and Mommy have gone to the pantomime in Kingston. What are we supposed to do? Stay here until they return? Just stay in boredom?
Gay felt uneasy. Their parents had purposefully left them at home while they went to the pantomime because Robbie's school report had been bad. It was his punishment. The sun was sinking in the west. It gave the clouds a pink color, and their reflection on the sea was the color of lavender. At first, the moon was almost crimson,
but as it rose, it became paler. Its light reflected from the smooth surface of the sea, cut a road of gold towards them. Gay was filled with admiration. She had often seen the moon rise over the sea, but it had never seemed so lovely before. She touched Robbie's hand gently.
Robbie, she said dreamily, what would it be like if we were in a boat sailing down that lane of gold?
The boy was quick to take advantage of her mood.
Let's go and find out, he said. All right, Gay said slowly. All right, I'll go.
Robbie jumped down off the stone, took Gay by the hand, and together the two children ran towards the house. It took them only a few minutes to walk from their house to the bay at Hector's River alongside the jetty. Alongside the jetty was their father's boat, bobbing gently on the water. They carried with them the sandwiches the helper had cut for supper and 2 bottles of soda they had taken from the refrigerator. Robbie also carried a record player and some records. Robbie soon finished getting the things onto the boat and then started the engine. Gay, still on the jetty, slipped the mooring and sprang aboard. The boy steered the boat out to sea. When it had rounded the headland, he turned east and headed towards the moon. He let the boat cruise slowly along the lane of gold the moon was making on the water. Gay looked at the sea, which was shimmering like a silken gown.
I'm so happy, Robbie, she said. The sea is very beautiful.
They looked back at the land and saw the lights of Hector's River dimly in the distance. Only the pop, pop, pop of the boat's engine disturbed the night. Robbie put on a record, and the youngsters sat together in the stern of the motorboat, listening to the music. As each record ended, Robbie or Gay put another. They ate their sandwiches and drank their soda. All sense of time was gone. Though the dark mass of the land behind them grew smaller and smaller, they did not notice, nor did they notice, that the wind had begun to rise and that by degrees the sea had lost its smooth surface. White frills had appeared, and the boat was bobbing more than it had done earlier. Then a wave slapped against the side of the boat, and a splash of water came over the side.
Robbie, the sea is getting rough, said Gay. We'd better go back. Nothing will happen in a sea like this, Robbie assured her. I say I want to go back, Gay cried out. You're a coward. Turn around the boat, or I shall tell. All right, said Robbie, putting aside the record he was about to play.
He went back to the tiller and spun the boat around in a tight circle. As he did so, a almost alarming thing happened. The engine of the boat stopped dead. In the dim light, he checked the fuel tank. It was empty.
We're out of fuel, he said calmly.
When Gay did not answer, he said again,
Do you hear? The tank is empty. It's dry. Leave me alone, she replied. I did not want to come. You forced me. Now see what we have gotten ourselves into.
She lowered her head into the palms of her hand and began to cry. Robbie did not know what to say. He felt that his sister was blaming him unfairly. But this was no time to argue. They did not have an oar on board. They could only drift, and drifting would never take them home. Gay was still crying, but she was forced to lift her face from her wet hands and hold on to the gunwales of the boat to stop herself from being thrown overboard. The sea, she thought, was a deceiver. It had lured them in with its beauty, and now it's ready to swallow them. All that night, both children were seasick. In addition, Robbie was flung so violently against the side of the boat that he cut his head badly, and by morning he had developed a fever. When the sun rose, its gentle rays soon warmed them and dried their clothing. But as it climbed higher into the sky, it turned from friend to foe and burned the children mercilessly. Though the wind had dropped and they were no longer in danger of drowning, Their suffering increased as the day dragged on. With his rising temperature and torturing thirst, Robbie was helpless. His cut hurt in the sun. Gay tore a strip from his shirt and bandaged him. However, he soon pulled off the bandage, which he felt was making his head throb worse than ever. He lay in the boat, feeling weak. He had said so little since the engine stopped that Gay was worried about him. She wondered whether he was silent because he felt there was no hope.
"We'll be all right, Robbie," she said. "Somebody will soon come for us," she said to soothe him. "Who will come for us?" he asked. "We have no one to look for us. Nobody cares or ought to care. Our parents hate us now. We did wrong." "Robbie, please don't talk like that."
His strength growing. He sat up, feeling his strength growing less and less. He became heartless and was ready to hurt her.
"I'm not like you. I always speak the truth. I know I am bad, and I say so."
His brows were set, and his face bathed in sweat. Robbie looked at the sea with his half-shut eyes.
"Look," he said suddenly. "There's a green meadow around us, flat green country. A river runs in the distance. Let's get some water."
He staggered to his feet and attempted to step off the boat.
"No, please don't, Robbie," Gay pleaded.
She stood up just in time to take hold of him.
"That's not a meadow," she said. "That's seawater. We can't drink it." "Water, water everywhere," he quoted, "and not a drop to drink. I am thirsty. Oh, so thirsty."
Gay was thirsty too, and her head throbbed. Her lips were cracked, the skin on her face was peeling, and her black hair was dry and disheveled. She sat with her head lowered because it hurt her eyes to look at the water with the sun shining on it. She hoped someone would guess where they had gone.
"Please, God," she prayed, "let it rain."
She knew Robbie was very sick. The fever and vomiting had exhausted him, and he badly needed water. The rain clouds gathered quickly, and in another 20 minutes the rain was pouring down. As it hit the sea, it sent off a fine spray which made it impossible to see more than a few yards ahead. The rain woke Robbie. He lay on his back with his eyes closed and his mouth open to catch the precious water. Gay, too, helped herself. Then she cupped her hands, and when they were full, she emptied the water into Robbie's mouth. Robbie's temperature was down, and his head throbbed no more. He felt much stronger, even though he had not eaten. He rose and walked about in the boat and scanned the horizon looking for help.
"Do you think people are looking for us?" he asked her. "I am sure they are," she replied. "But so far they have failed to find us. However, it can't be long before they do," she went on. "The fisherman we met is sure to have told Daddy that we went out in the boat, and they will send out a search party for us. They will have to hurry, or it will be dark again. No one will ever find us in the dark," said Robbie,
sitting down beside his sister in the stern of the boat. For a time, they sat there silently, hand in hand. Robbie was the first to hear the plane, and Gay the first to see it as it flew out of the sunset. They jumped up and began to wave at it. Then Robbie saw with dismay that the plane was not going to pass overhead, and that the pilot might not notice them at all. Quickly stripping off what was left of his shirt, he waved it violently above his head like a flag. A few moments later, the plane altered course and dived towards them.
"He's seen us! He has seen us!" said Gay, hugging her brother with delight.
Standing side by side, they watched the plane as it circled round their boats. Then the plane flew away in the direction from which it had come. About half an hour later, the children heard it again. Looking towards the horizon, they saw it circling over another boat. They knew it was guiding the people towards them. The roar of its engine died down. They heard their father calling.
Robbie, Gay, are you both safe?
Yes, Daddy, they repeated weakly. We're all right.
Thank God. Thank God they heard him say to the man beside him.
A moment later, he jumped aboard, and the children flung themselves into his arms. For a time, he was too overcome with emotion to speak.
I'm sorry, Daddy, said Robbie, as his father lifted Gay and himself into the rescue craft. It was all my fault. Gay didn't want to come.
He was thinking how lucky they were to have been rescued. He knew that his recklessness had nearly caused the death of himself and his sister. The end.
Lovely. Thank you for that beautiful reading, Mrs. Wilson. And thank you, Blake. It is important that parents read with their children as it instills a love for books and learning, setting them on a path of continuous growth and exploration. It empowers children to become independent readers and lifelong learners. Students, I hope from that last story you would have learned that while embracing your natural creativity, you should never, let me repeat, you should never venture too far away from the guidance and protection of your parents like Gay and Robbie did. Now, do you agree? Well, I'm agreeing for you. Now, let me know your thoughts on the ordeal Gay and Robbie found themselves in at sea. All right, so let us check in with the comments on our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Okay. So Gibraltar Primary and Infant, they're sending greetings from St. Anne. Thank you for the greetings, Gibraltar Primary. The comments and, okay. QN, Chatsworth Primary and Infant School. Oh, he said he loved the general storyline. Look at you, Kwayne. Okay. All right. Charlton Infant School, Class 2. Brady is listening. Good morning to you, Brady. Ramona from Chatsworth Primary and Infant. Oh, she's speaking about the previous story. She said, I love how the doctor wanted to help Robbie with the cost of the hearing aid. That's good. We should all try to be our brother's keeper. Another person said that they found it quite frightening that Gay and Robbie were at sea. Just imagine having a fever. There is no water. Thank the Lord for some rain. Lovely. All right. So those are the comments that we have so far. We have another story for you this morning, and this story is entitled The Prize. Now, this story is going to be read by our Public Relations Officer at the JIS, Mr. Jermaline Nelson. Good morning, Mr. Nelson.
Good morning,
Good
Ms.
morning.
Rowe.
We
Thank
are
you.
ready for you to take us through the story.
All right, let's go. So, as Ms. Rowe said, this story is called The Prize. All the children of Mrs. Miller's class at Coffee Hill School were practicing for festival. That is, all the children except Carol. Carol sat to one side of the room with her legs drawn up against her body and her skirt pulled tightly around her. She had her arms around her knees and her head resting on them. She tried to look as if she was not all interested in what was happening, but her eyes were very bright as they followed the dancers who whirled and skipped around the room. The children were dancing to the tune of Evening Time, and they planned to enter this dance for festival. Carol thought of the words of Evening Time, which was one of her favorite songs. Evening time, work is over, now is evening time. As she watched, she imagined that she was whirling around the room with the others. Oh, how Carol wished she could dance. But she could not because she was different from the other children. She had been born with one leg shorter than the other, and she could not even stand straight. As tears came to her eyes, she closed them tightly so that no one would notice how sad she was. But Mrs. Miller had noticed, and while she waited for the dancers to finish, she wondered what she could do to help Carol. Well, she said, now that you have learned these first steps, let us plan the rest of our performance. Besides people with heavy loads and those grinding and those digging and carrying water, the song tells us about others as well. There are some playing a ring game, some breaking stones, and there is also cooking being done. Now, the cooking, Mrs. Miller continued, is an important part of the act, and I am choosing Carol to do that part. I also have another idea. Just before the end of the dance, I want all of you to join hands and dance around Carol. At the same time, you will all sing the words of the song. That will make our performance more interesting. Then Mrs. Miller turned to Carol and added, "You have a lovely voice, Carol, so I expect you to lead the singing. In fact, I'm going to let you sing some of it alone. Can you manage that?" "Yes, miss," replied Carol with a smile. But she still would not be dancing, and that is what Carol really wanted to do. Anyway, this is the first time we are entering festival, and I want you to remember one thing. Even if we don't win a prize, the most important thing is for us to do our best, said Mrs. Miller. When Mrs. Miller finished speaking, the children went running and skipping out into the schoolyard. School was over for the day. Carol was still in the classroom, slowly putting her books in her bag. "Is something wrong?" asked Mrs. Miller. "No, miss," whispered Carol as she held her head down and tried to pretend that she was very busy with her books. "Come and talk to me," said Mrs. Miller, putting her arms around her. It's just that I wish I could dance," said Carol shyly. "I know it's foolish, but I just wish I could dance." Now that Mrs. Miller had spoken to her, she felt very close to tears. "Well," said Mrs. Miller as she patted Carol's arm, "I wish I could dance too, but I don't do it very well because I'm too fat. So instead of dancing, I teach children to dance." Carol tried to smile because she knew that Mrs. Miller was being kind to her and trying to make her laugh. It was true that when Mrs. Miller showed them the steps for the dance, she looked very funny because she was so fat. But Carol was sure that when Mrs. Miller was younger, she was not so fat and was able to dance. But I have never danced. After Carol had left, Mrs. Miller sat at her table and thought for a long time. Finally, she decided on a plan, and she hoped it would work. Then one day a visitor came to watch them dance. He was a tall, thin man, and he dressed in a bright red shirt and strange-looking tight black pants. "Children," she continued, "this is Mr. Jones, a friend of mine from the School of Dance in town. He has come to see our dance and give us some help." "All right," said Mr. Jones, "I'm going to dance along with you, and we'll see what we can do. Now, don't be nervous. This is one of my favorite tunes, and so I know I'm going to enjoy dancing with you." As the music started, he joined the children, and every now and then he would call out, "Those arms are too straight. Bend the knees a little. Keep those heads steady. Pretend you are enjoying yourselves after a hard day's work. Step and skip and skip. That's it. Lovely," he said. While all this was going on, Carol sat to one side with her pot, which was placed on some stones so that it would look as if she were cooking. When the music stopped, Mr. Jones looked at Carol as if he was noticing her for the first time. "Come, little girl," he said, as he held out his arms and helped her to her feet. "I think it would make the performance more interesting if the lady who cooks also joins in the dance at the end. Let us try a few steps." "Oh, I can't," whispered Carol, pulling away shyly. "I can't dance. I have a bad leg." She wished with all her heart that she could just disappear. "Don't let that stop you," replied Mr. Jones with a smile. "I have taught quite a few people like you to dance. Don't be afraid. I will help you, and we will do very easy steps." Carol stood as if stuck to the spot. Mrs. Miller turned on the music, and then the man took his first step. Then, as Carol heard the beautiful tune, she began to move. Then across the room they went. Carol was dancing. Her steps were not as steady as those of the other children, and she did not skip, but she was moving in time to the music. When the music stopped, the children clapped their hands and shouted. They were proud of Carol. Then Mrs. Miller smiled and said, "Well, Carol, you have danced, and you will dance in festival with us." Carol was so amazed at what had happened that she could hardly speak. "Yes, miss," she said quietly, but her eyes were bright and happy. "As you practice, you will become better," said Mr. Jones. "Yes," replied Carol. "Thank you very much for helping me." When Carol told her parents that evening, they could hardly believe it, but they were happy for her. To their surprise, Carol did not look as happy as they expected. "What is it, Carol?" asked her mother. You wanted to dance and now you have a chance to try. But, replied Carol, I will be nervous. Even if I practice, I will never dance as well as the others. And I have to sing part of the song alone. Well, Carol, replied her father, from what you tell us, you will not be doing as many different steps as the other children. So no one will notice if you are perhaps not quite as good. And I can tell you that all the children will be nervous about going on that big stage in front of a lot of people. Most people are nervous when they do things for the first time. We know that you can sing well. You sing at church all the time, don't you? Yes, agreed Carol. Yes, I suppose I can do it. As the time for festival drew closer, the children practiced every day, for they wanted to win a prize. Then it was the day of their big performance. The bus drove steadily over the hillside roads. Often there were high mountains on one side, while the land dropped sharply away on the other. Then, at last, they stopped at one of the big buildings. There were so many school children in front of it. Mrs. Miller said that this was the theater where the festival contest would be held. The children of Coffee Hill School had been sitting for so long that they could hardly straighten their knees. But soon they were jumping out of the bus and rushing into the theater. Then they went straight to their places as it was almost time for the show to begin. At last, it was Coffee Hill's turn. The girls' bright red skirts and white lace blouses made a lovely picture next to the boys' black pants and bright blue shirts. The children did their steps beautifully, just as the teacher from the dance school had shown them. Carol sat to one side with her pot on the make-believe fire. When it was time for her to join the dancers, she held hands with one of the other children and danced across the stage. The children knew that she would not fall, and nobody watching even noticed that her steps were not quite as steady as those of the other children. Then, for the final part of the performance, the children sang while they danced. And after that, Carol stepped forward on the stage and sang the words of the song alone. Evening time, work is over, now is evening time. Her voice was sweet and clear as it filled the theater. And as the dance finished, Carol's voice softly ended with, feel the evening breeze. Suddenly, there was a great noise as people clapped their hands and shouted. Others got to their feet and called out, yeah, yeah. A fat man with a large beard went up on stage and began to speak. Well, he said, today we have seen a beautiful show. Then the man continued, now children, teachers, and parents, when I said we had seen a wonderful show, I did not mean only one gold medal winner. We were so pleased with the performance of another school that we have decided to give a special prize this year. It goes to Coffee Hill School, who are entering the contest for the very first time. This is not a song contest, but we wish to say that the young lady who was chosen to sing by herself touched our hearts. She has a beautiful voice. Will that little young lady come up and get a special prize for her school? As people clapped and shouted, Mrs. Miller held on to Carol's arm and said, that's you he's talking about, Carol. Go up on stage. I can't, she said, and her knees felt weak with fright. I don't walk well. What are you saying, child? Cried Mrs. Miller. Don't be shy. Nobody minds how you walk. You can walk and you can dance, and what is more, you can sing. Carol thought she was in a dream as she went up for the special prize. The children of Coffee Hill School jumped to their feet and shouted, yeah, Carol! Yeah, Coffee Hill! There were other medals, but Carol hardly noticed what was happening. She could not even remember traveling back home. It was all still like a lovely dream. She wondered if she would wake up the next morning and find that it had not really happened. But in the morning, when she saw her parents' happy faces, she knew it was true. When Carol got to school, everybody called out to her. She felt as if she was famous. In the classroom, Mrs. Miller said, Carol, how do you feel today? I'm not sure, miss, Carol answered with a smile. I still can't believe that it is true, but I want to thank you for all your help. The end.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. What a sweet story, you know? So what was the important lesson to be learned here? Place your answers in the comments and also tell me what you think the real prize was, right? The special award won by Coffee Hill School, or was it Carol realizing that she is special in her own unique way. All right, let's see some comments. Okay. Oh, look at that. Oh, my goodness. So the students of Gibraltar Primary and Infant School cried tears of joy to see themselves being featured. Oh, we are happy that we could make you happy, Gibraltar. And we also see comments about, here's a lesson that is shared. It is okay to be nervous, but you should still try in spite of it. And another, it is okay to be different. Still stand out. Your differences are what make you special. Keep the comments rolling in. Okay. All right. So for the final story for the morning, we will be joined by a very special guest. She is none other than our very own Minister of Education and Youth, the Honorable Favour Williams. Minister Williams will be reading from the Danny Williams School for the Deaf.
Good morning, boys and girls. Today, entitled Unstoppable Me. 10 ways to soar through life. You are great no matter what. You're worthwhile simply because you're alive. Never forget this, and you're sure to thrive. Learn from your mistakes, and you'll get stronger as you grow. Believe you'll succeed, and then make it so. If you value yourself and all that you are, you'll be unstoppable, the next superstar. Do you believe that? All right. So, number 2, persistence. When there's something in your life that you want to do, once you begin, you must follow through. It's not about talent or if you are smart. It's about never quitting something you start. Don't tell yourself, I can't, or dwell on mistakes. Patience and determination are really all that it takes. We'll go to number 3, then we'll do one more after that. Welcome the unknown. Change is a good thing. It happens every day. If you learn this when you're young, it will help you on your way. Each day is different from the day before, and it sometimes feels scary when opening a new door. But if you don't fear change and embrace it instead, life will be an adventure and you look forward. So let me pause to say good morning, boys and girls. My name is Favour Williams, and I'm the Minister of Education and Youth. And it's a delight and a pleasure to be here this morning, to be with you at the R. Danny Williams Primary School for the Deaf.
Ah, lovely. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we have come to the end of our program for this morning. We explored stories that taught us about the importance of kindness, self-acceptance, mindfulness, and the significance of exercising caution in our actions. We also learned that adults, such as teachers and parents, are influential in children reaching their full potential, very much like that story with Mr. Lee. Thank you for spending your morning with us as we read the stories from the Dr. Bird reading series, The Prize and Other Stories, and Crab Hunt and Other Stories. Thank you also to our readers, the planning and production team here at the JIS, and the contributors to the Dr. Bird reading series. We hope you have been inspired to go and take up a book today and read. And for those who, perhaps want to start reading more, but you don't know where to begin, here is some advice from your peers.
My name is Leslie McLean and I am from Grovetown Primary and Infant School. If you want to start reading, the best place to start is at home. Reading materials are everywhere, sometimes gathering dust at home. Picture reading starts from the basics and watch reading videos. Reading should be a hobby. Access all the resources that can help you become a reader.
Hello, my name is Malik Quentin of the St. Elizabeth Technical High School. Young people, I would advise you to start reading novels and mystery books that are very interesting to you, and it will give you more knowledge and a better understanding of what you're reading about, and it will actually help you in your life in different situations and very important situations. So I think that's a very good way to start reading.
Hi, my name is Halistar Wilson, Deputy Head Girl of Freetown Primary School. My advice to younger people who want to start reading but do not know where to start is to start by going to the library, or you can do some online research to find books that you are most interested in reading. And from there, you can start your reading journey.
Excellent. It is said that reading is essential for those who seek to rise above the ordinary. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of Read Across Jamaica Day and Education Week. I have been your host, Lisa Rowe. Keep reading.